Hello new and returning viewers alike. 2 years ago I made and uploaded the first episode of this series in which I trade up to eventually owning one of every Halo in-game. For reasons I won't talk about, I just didn't work on it for a long time. I did some trading and got a few more Halos, which I won't count for the challenge as they're to be resold for profit. The rules for this long-term challenge is that I spin a wheel which has the names of one of each Halo, and whatever it lands on, that's the Halo I need to get in the episode. If it's a more expensive, high-ticket Halo such as one that's values in the millions, I'll most likely split it into 2 or 3 separate videos depending on how long it takes me to get. Last time in the first episode I succeeded in reaching my goal of getting Mermaid Halo 2020. Before I move on, I request that you go follow me on Roblox. Liking the video and maybe subscribing is also greatly appreciated. I genuinely enjoy making these videos where I document my trading process. Hustling is just something I enjoy doing, and making it into videos makes it even more fun for me. Now without further ado, let's spin the wheel. Looks like it's decided. My next goal is the Crown of the Realms Enchantraverse Halo. Here is everything I'm starting off with. I estimate everything to be valued at around 2,325,000 diamonds. The Halo is currently selling anywhere from 2.7 million to 2.8 million. I will also need to make sure that I still have stuff or diamonds left over to profit trade with after. Which realistically brings my goal up to 3.5 to 4 million diamonds. Now that I've explained everything, let's get right into trading. Starting off the episode with a win, I bought the Sweetheart Strap Tube Top and Queen Bee Cheer Bow for 85k, which I estimate to be 25 to 30k profit. Shortly after, someone traded and asked if they could see my shop. They ended up purchasing my watercolor top and overalls for 35k. Found someone selling this cool looking dragon staff for 1k. Decided to buy it since I might be able to sell it for 2k. Profit is profit. I made what I think was a pretty smart decision when it comes to tradability. Someone offered me their posy sleeves for my Avrilis jacket. I've been struggling to trade this jacket for a bit. The sleeves themselves are worth a bit more than the jacket, and from personal experience are easier to trade. Someone bought one of my Snowswan skirts for 24k, which I don't think is too bad. I traded the Dear Dolly heels and Whimsy, which bought us for 20k, and Royal Rebel heels. I think it's a pretty fair trade since it gets rid of an item to sell and I get diamonds. The posy skirt sold for 70k, 5k less than I'd have liked but still more than what I bought it for, so it's a win in my books. I sold this Angelic Promises necklace for 60k. I tend to buy these under 60k a lot and consistently sell them for 60k, so you might see me selling and buying this necklace a few times. I did also sell this Nature Fairy dress to a girl that was very sweet for 64k. For the same reasons I buy Angelic Promise necklaces, I also buy Halos like Spring 20. I can consistently sell it at 350k and sometimes more if they're paying in items. I should be able to make at least 10k from this Halo without too much effort. Usually after I show people my shop full of bigger items, I ask if they also want to see some of the smaller, cheaper thing, because some of it is quite cute and I need it gone anyways. I sold this very sweet person some of these items for 10k, the price was originally 12 to 13k, but again, needed it gone anyways, so gave a discount. Took a little while, but someone bought my Shadow Empress sleeves for 8k. I took a little break from the trading hub for a bit and decided to grind XP/diamonds in art class and got a decent amount of diamonds. After sleeping and waking up, I bought this cotton tote for 3,569 diamonds, which hopefully I can sell for 4 to 5k depending on how lucky I am. After yapping and having a good conversation about the Royal High toys and trading in general, I sold this person my Chromie gloves for 10k to get them gone. They also bought a lot of my smaller items for 45,500 and Senpai's toothbrush. And because Pookie Bear has a slight hoarding problem, they bought a few of my items with almost all the rest of their diamonds. I bought this Goddess of Triumph skirt for 75k in hopes that I can at least sell it for 80k or more. I tend to struggle with selling Goddess of Triumph items nowadays. After they traded me back and paid 55k for my posy sleeves, I received a mood-changing necklace for my sweetheart tube top, which I think is a nice win value-wise. Someone later bought this cotton tote of mine for 5k, which I purchased for 3,569 diamonds not too long ago, so turned a small, but nice profit. After waiting for someone to give an actual fair offer for this Mermia crown, I finally sold it for 24k. My Pookie, who has a hoarding and spending problem, came back once again to buy more of my bigger items. Like and subscribe to get Pookie professional help. I managed to trade my Winter 18 Halo for the Easter 19 Halo, nice win value wise, and also a very underrated Halo. Looks very pretty when equipped. Before I could name my price, this person insisted on paying 19k for these two items, so I took it. Honestly, a nice little win here. I purchased these Goddess of Triumph heels for 95k, which at first I thought I was going to regret doing, but very quickly sold for 110k alongside my Snowswan skirt for 25k. Not too long after I did another trade I thought I was going to regret by trading my Mermaid 20 Halo for this Mermaid 19 Halo. Much to my surprise, I sold it very quickly not too long after that other trade I thought I was going to regret for 580k, which overall I did make a profit. Sold the Kawaii Demon Horns for 1k. Sold this Opposites Attract transformation dress and bodice for 25k. I made a few different purchases here in hopes of making profit. I bought this bat pack for 15k diamonds. Summer Fantasy sleeves and this vampire crown, which I think is quite cool, for 12k. Only for my Pookie Bear, who has a spending and hoarding problem, to come along yet again and buy my items at what we call good boy prices for 33k, bringing me 6k profit. Adding to the train of sales, I finally managed to sell this Chromie cape for 25k diamonds. Never am I ever accepting Chromie accessories in trades again. If I do, then please kill me. Found someone who was selling their cookie cutters at 15k and their goth LOL sleeves for 10k diamonds, which I think is an absolute steal. I bought yet another Angelic Promises necklace for 55k diamonds, which is a little more than I'd usually pay but can still profit from it. I also bought another Angelic Promises necklace for 50k, which is what I tend to usually pay for them. I quickly sold one of said Angelic Promises necklaces for 57k diamonds. I know I've said this before, but they're just so good for making guaranteed profit off of, which is why I keep buying them. I found these December's Dreams shoes being sold at 15k, which I should be able to resell for 18 to 20k diamonds. I managed to sell 2 halos to this person. In the first trade they bought my lucky 2019 Halo for 325k diamonds, which I think is quite good. Then afterwards they traded me back and paid 350k for my spring 2020 Halo. I never take any less than 350k on this Halo, as I've consistently sold it at that price multiple times, and there is always someone willing to pay that. The TTYL earrings sold for 5k. I think the bows on them are really cute. I bought these crowned court sleeves for 55k, which hopefully I can sell for 60k. I purchased yet another Mermaid 20 Halo for 491k. I can sell it for 510k pretty easily. Here are a few more purchases I made. I should be able to sell them all for profit. I tend to try buy items that people are always after / sell quite well. Sometimes I buy smaller items that I know will sell. Most of the time it's bigger items that have higher demand. Here are some of the items I just purchased or traded for that I sold quickly for profit. I easily sold these Starlight Sneaks for 65k diamonds. I also sold the Snow Swan heels almost instantly after I listed them on Tradery for 65k. I traded boots that I bought for 55k specifically to trade for the Snow Swan heels. That gives a nice 10k diamonds profit. After a little while of waiting, I managed to sell this Royal Rebel skirt for 12,069 diamonds. The buyer specifically noted that they loved the price teehee. I also sold one of the 2 Dear Dolly ruffled skirts for 8,069 diamonds. I think angels must have been watching over me here because somehow managed to find somebody selling Posey's skirt for 50k. You best bet I bought that thing as fast as I could. That's a solid 25k win. This Whimsy Witch skirt sold for 36k diamonds. I bought a few Opposites Attract items which I should be able to resell for a decent amount of profit. I also managed to finally sell the last Dear Dolly skirt for 8,069 diamonds. I bought this Spring 20 Halo again for 320k, which is a solid 30k profit. I also bought another Bat Pack for 15k, which is another 5k profit as I can resell it to someone for 20k diamonds. I also bought a second Bat Pack for 17k diamonds. An Angelic Promises necklace sold for 59,069 diamonds. I found another player selling their Posey skirt at the cheap price of 66.5k diamonds, so I bought it. I later quickly sold the Posey skirt and the Opposites Attract dress together for 100k. I traded a few smaller items for this Snow Swan hat, which hopefully I can trade for 4 to 5k diamonds. I also sold a bunch of my smaller items to this person for 5k diamonds as they offered to round up and pay the extra 500. Some people restore my faith in royal high humanity. One of the Bat Packs sold for 20k diamonds. And after which quite literally felt like forever, I finally managed to sell this Chromie crown for 15k diamonds. I purchased this Goddess of Triumph bodice for 75k, hopefully I can resell it for 80 to 85k diamonds. Someone sold me their Snow Swan heels for 55k, which I can easily resell for 60 to 65k diamonds. Yet another consistent sale of 60k diamonds for my Angelic Promises necklace. Somebody offered me a few items for my Spring 20 Halo. After reselling, I should have around 50 to 60k profit from this trade. Keeping up with the profit, I bought these Starlight Sneaks for 61k and this bodice for 130k, which I should hopefully be able to resell for 14k profit. As expected, the Starlight Sneaks sold quickly and easily for 65k diamonds. I also purchased another Spring 20, which I got for 331,069 diamonds, which I can very easily resell for 350k. I traded a couple items for this Dove Fascinator, which hopefully will be easier to sell. I sold the Goth Lolita sleeves for 15k diamonds. I also traded this Charmed Heart bodice and a Bat Pack for watercolor shoes, which I think was a nice win. I bought some more Goth Lolita sleeves for 12k. Looking back now, it feels more like a meh trade. The Prom Queen dress sold very quickly for 245k diamonds. I traded this Posey skirt to a friend for a parasol and Whimsy Witch skirt. The Winter Guardian bodice finally sold for 14k diamonds. The December's Dreams skirt also finally sold for 25k diamonds. I purchased yet another Angelic Promises necklace, this time for 56k diamonds. I also bought a nymph dress for 62k diamonds. couldn't help myself and bought yet another Angelic Promises necklace for 55k diamonds. I even managed to buy Snow Swan heels for 55k diamonds. The Opposites Attracts gloves eventually sold for 15,069 diamonds. My Pookie Bear with a hoarding problem traded me a couple posy items so she can have her favorite bodice. Somebody offered me Spring 20 Halo and 160k for my Mermaid 20 Halo. I accepted that offer in a heartbeat. Yet another Angelic Promises necklace sold easily for 60k diamonds. And another Spring 20 Halo sold for 350k diamonds. I sold a few more smaller items for 5k diamonds. I decided to just sell these Whimsy Witch sleeves for 19k diamonds to get rid of them. On an unexpected note, somebody traded me the Charmed Heart bodice and skirt for my Posy Butterfly. I sold the Charmed Heart skirt for 80k diamonds. I somehow managed to find somebody who'd take Crowned Court sleeves for Starlight sneaks. The Charmed Heart bodice also sold for 80,069 diamonds. Yet another flawless sale of Spring 20 for 350k diamonds. The Posy sleeves sold for 58k diamonds. The Snow Swan heels sold for 60k diamonds as expected. And the Starlight sneaks sold for 65k diamonds. After what felt like forever, the Opposites Attract headphones sold for 4k diamonds. The Angelic Promises necklace and nymph dress sold together for 125,069 diamonds. I bought this steampunk bodice for 85,069 diamonds. I also purchased more Goddess of Triumph heels for 105,069 diamonds. And sold the steampunk bodice for 90k diamonds. Somebody was selling their Goddess of Triumph heels for 100k and yet again couldn't resist the 10k in profit. I paid 569 diamonds for a fun-looking fork. I also bought a few smaller items for 869 diamonds, which I think is quite a nice deal. I purchased yet another Spring 20 Halo for 331,069 diamonds. I bought another Mermaid 20 Halo for 490k diamonds. I purchased a couple more Posy items for 140k diamonds. I should be able to make 15k profit. I traded a bunch more small items that probs never would have gotten sold otherwise for this Royal Rebel veil. I traded some Posy sleeves to a friend for a bunch of items and 5k in pure diamond crack. I sold the Goddess of Triumph bodice for 80k and the strawberry picking basket for 4k. The Posy Butterfly sold quickly for 100k diamonds. I purchased this Sugar Dough skirt for 95k diamonds. The Heavenly Harp sold for 5,069 diamonds. After what felt like forever, the Distinguished Doctor hat sold for 19,069 diamonds. The Goddess of Triumph heels sold for a predictable 110k diamonds. And Mermaid 20 sold for 510k diamonds. I sold yet another pair of Goddess of Triumph heels for 110k diamonds. I bought the Charmed Heart bodice and skirt for 150k diamonds. I purchased some caddy glasses for 24,069 diamonds. And sold them quickly for 29,069 diamonds. I purchased some bunny slippers for 80k diamonds. I sold the Charmed Heart bodice for 80k diamonds. And the bunny slippers for 85k diamonds. I sold this Stars and Moon pendant for 250 diamonds. I bought a TTYL bodice for 8k diamonds. These Crowned Court sleeves finally sold for 58k diamonds. I sold yet another Angelic Promises necklace for 60k diamonds. I somehow managed to sell Snow Swan heels for 65k diamonds. And bought more Starlight sneaks for 61k diamonds. I also purchased yet another Spring 20 Halo for 335k diamonds. I traded a parasol for this Wicked Vampiress skirt, which will be easier to sell. I purchased yet another Angelic Promises necklace for 51k diamonds. I sold this Whimsy Witch skirt for 35k diamonds. The Lullaby bodice finally sold for 19k diamonds. I somehow sold Starlight Sneaks for 69,069 diamonds. And sold the Royal Rebel Veil for 5k diamonds. The Royal Rebel boots also finally sold for 9k diamonds. This Dove Fascinator sold for 2,069 diamonds. The Angelic Promises necklace sold yet again for 60k diamonds. I sold the Wicked Vampiress skirt for 35k and the Whimsy Witch hat for 12k diamonds. I purchased more Starlight Sneaks for 60k diamonds. I also purchased a Posy skirt for 70k diamonds. Somebody offered me their Mermaid Royalty crown and 2k diamonds for my December's Dream shoes, which I'd say is a nice little win. You probably saw this coming already. I bought another Angelic Promises necklace for 50k diamonds. And purchased yet another Posy skirt for 70k diamonds. After a fairly long while after receiving it in a trade, I finally sold this powder bonnet for 2k diamonds. I traded Spring 20 for Whimsy Witch shoes and 325k in pure diamond crack, which should get me at least a nice solid 25k profit. I purchased this prom dress at the cheap price of 232,069 diamonds, which sold almost immediately for 270k diamonds. I purchased this Goth skirt for 75k diamonds. I then purchased another Goddess of Triumph skirt, a prom dress, and a Spring 20 Halo for 650k, which I'd say is a pretty good deal. I purchased a Vogue dress for the cheap price of 150k diamonds. And another Spring 20 Halo for 335k diamonds. I purchased yet another prom dress for 250k diamonds. I quickly sold the Vogue dress for 185k diamonds. By some miracle, I sold the Up in Heaven's Clouds wings for 1.5k diamonds. I also sold this North Pole Presents skirt for 1.5k diamonds. One of the Spring 20 Halos sold yet again for 350k diamonds. And another Angelic Promises necklace sold easily for 60k diamonds as usual. One of the Posy skirts sold for 75k diamonds. I bought this Celestial Veil and Strawberry Picking basket for the steal of 12k diamonds. I purchased more bunny slippers for 77k diamonds. And sold another prom dress for 270k diamonds. I purchased this magical broomstick for 76,069 diamonds. I also purchased this December's Dreams bodice for 7k diamonds, which I hope to make a little bit of profit on. I bought this Whimsy Witch bodice, which for 15k, I can resell it fairly easily for 18k diamonds. I bought this Secret Fairy on Earth skirt for 1.5k diamonds. I then purchased this Spring Circlet for 5,569 diamonds. I also bought their cotton tote for 2k diamonds. I then picked up some Star Frost skates for 15k diamonds. And this spring cleaning duster for 669 diamonds. Somebody was selling their Mermaid 20 Halo at 490k, so you know I had to pick that up. I purchased this Wicked Vampiress skirt and Posy skirt for 100k diamonds. I sold the original 2019 parasol, magical broomstick, and spring circlet to my Pookie Bear with a hoarding and spending problem for 577,500 diamonds. I then sold one of the Goddess of Triumph skirts for 85k diamonds. And bought yet another Spring 20 Halo for 335k diamonds. I traded the Charmed Heart skirt for the Goddess of Triumph bodice and 20k diamonds, which is a really nice win. I managed to finally sell Kitchen Accident for 1,569 diamonds. I traded the Wicked Vampiress skirt for some Fallen Fae wings, which I'd say is a small win. I purchased this 2018 pumpkin candy bag for 19k diamonds as my Pookie Bear with a hoarding and spending problem was looking for one. I purchased another magical broomstick for 70k diamonds. I sold this cozy sweater and Fallen Fae wings for 124k diamonds. I purchased this Avrilla skirt for 275k diamonds, which I can easily resell for 300k. I traded the Avrilla skirt for 190k diamonds and a Goddess of Triumph bow, which should be 340k in value. I sold a few smaller items for 1,900 diamonds. Somebody traded me 2 pairs of Whimsy Witch shoes for this Sugar Dough skirt. I sold the magical broomstick for 80k diamonds. I bought a parasol for 30k diamonds, which I can resell for 35k diamonds. I then bought this posy butterfly for 95k diamonds. I also purchased some swimmer flippers for 800 diamonds. I sold the Celestial Veil, Goth Lolita purse and Whimsy Witch shoes for 72k diamonds. I then sold the TTYL bodice for 17k diamonds, which is 9k profit since I bought it for 8k. I sold an elegant parasol for 35k diamonds as expected. I also sold the Mermaid Royalty crown after for 22k diamonds. I traded the Starfrost skates for December's Dreams shoes, which hopefully should be a small win or easier to sell. The Posy Butterfly sold for 101k diamonds. The Strawberry Picking Basket then sold for 4k diamonds. I traded these Goddess of Triumph heels, Cookie Cutters and December's Dreams shoes for these horns, Otherworldly Potion and Posy sleeves. I sold the Goddess of Triumph bow for 150k diamonds. The Posy sleeves sold quickly for 55k diamonds. I sold this dolly for 970 diamonds. I then purchased another Spring 20 halo for 330k diamonds. I also bought another Wicked Vampiress skirt for 32k diamonds. I traded this Goddess of Triumph bodice for Whimsy Witch shoes and 30k diamonds. I then traded a Spring 20 halo for 260k in pure diamond crack and ice fairy dress. I bought some Cookie Cutters for 14k diamonds. I then sold one of my Posy skirts for 72k diamonds. I purchased a few skirts and Mon Sherry sleeves for 29k. And then sold some Whimsy Witch shoes for 50k diamonds. I purchased another Angelic Promises necklace for 55k diamonds. I sold this Wicked Vampiress skirt for 35k diamonds. And another pair of Whimsy Witch shoes for 52k diamonds. I sold this Halloween 20 halo for 810k diamonds. And then sold another Angelic Promises necklace for 60k diamonds. I then purchased a Mermaid 20 halo for 495k. And sold this Whimsy Witch bodice for 18k diamonds. I sold the Dear Dolly skirt for 8k diamonds afterwards. I bought another Mermaid 20 halo for 475k diamonds. I then purchased Magical Enchantress for 80k diamonds. I purchased this Vines necklace for 1,569 diamonds. I then purchased these watercolor shoes for 100k diamonds. I bought another Spring 20 halo for 330k diamonds. I sold the 2018 pumpkin candy bag and Vines necklace to Pookie Bear for 22,500 diamonds. I then traded the watercolor shoes for 60k diamonds, a parasol and fluttery frozen fan. And then I sold the Enchantress skirt for 90k diamonds. And the Ice Fairy dress also sold for 90k diamonds. I bought another Wicked Vampiress skirt for 30k diamonds. And purchased another Angelic Promises necklace for 55k diamonds. I sold one of the Mermaid 20 halos for 500k diamonds. I traded some horns, opposites attract shoes, otherworldly potion and whimsy witch shoes for some snow swan items and 100k diamonds. I then purchased more Goddess of Triumph heels for 105k diamonds. And another for 100k afterwards. I bought this Opposites Attract Bear and Mon Sherry bag for 10k diamonds. I sold this Angelic Promises necklace for 65k diamonds. I bought some Summer Fantasy heels for 15k diamonds. I bought some Starfrost skates for the same price. I bought this Celestial Flower bouquet for 5k diamonds. I sold this Snow Swan bodice for 20k diamonds. On the topic of Snow Swan items, I bought more Snow Swan heels for 50k diamonds. I sold a parasol for 35k diamonds. I then sold this Wicked Vampiress skirt, Treasure Tracker's chest and Summer Fantasy heels for 57k diamonds. I bought another Enchantress skirt for 85k diamonds. I bought another Whimsy Witch bodice for 15k diamonds. I traded some Goddess of Triumph heels for this Zesty 2024 candy bag. I bought another Posy skirt afterwards for 70k diamonds. And another Whimsy Witch bodice for 15k diamonds. I also bought this Charmed Heart skirt for 72k diamonds. My Pookie Bear with a hoarding and spending problem traded me some items and diamonds for diamonds and the Zesty candy bag. I traded one of my Spring 20 halos for cookie cutters, Starfrost set, Valk dress and Winter Guardian boots. I then purchased some more jeweled elven ear cuffs for 1.5k diamonds. And a Goddess of Triumph parasol for 269,069 diamonds. My Pookie Bear with a hoarding and spending problem paid me 100k diamonds, Charmed Heart skirt and Summit Shredder boots for this Valk dress. I purchased another Goddess of Triumph bow for 140k diamonds. I did the same trade afterwards with a different person. I then purchased a Wicked Vampiress bodice for 120k diamonds. My Pookie Bear with a hoarding and spending problem came and bought a bunch of items for 380k diamonds. I sold another Spring 20 halo for 350k diamonds. I then sold a Goddess of Triumph parasol for 295k diamonds. And a Goddess of Triumph bow for 150k diamonds. The Wicked Vampiress bodice also sold for 130k. Some Snow Swan heels sold yet again for 60k diamonds. On the topic of Snow Swan heels, I traded another pair of Snow Swan heels for this Goddess of Triumph bodice, which is a nice 20k win. Afterwards I sold the Starfrost set for 50k diamonds. I sold some cookie cutters for 17k diamonds. I then sold Teddy Zilla for 10k diamonds. Afterwards I sold this Opposites Attract dress for 25k diamonds. This person who I think likes potatoes bought this Goddess of Triumph bodice for 79,069 diamonds. I sold another pair of cookie cutters for 17k diamonds. I then purchased this Celestial bouquet for 5k diamonds. Afterwards I traded this Spring 20 halo for a Goddess of Triumph bow, parasol and a steampunk bodice. I then purchased this Mend My Heart teddy for 6k diamonds. And then I purchased another Wicked Vampiress bodice for 125k diamonds. I sold this Mermaid 20 halo for 500k diamonds. I then sold the Charmed Heart skirt, Posy skirt and steampunk bodice for 235k diamonds. After I bought this Whimsy Witch skirt for 30k diamonds. I then sold this Goddess of Triumph parasol for 290k diamonds. Afterwards I purchased this Posy crown for 265k diamonds. And sold this Wicked Vampiress skirt for 35k diamonds. I then bought some posy sleeves for 55k diamonds. I also purchased more snow swan heels for 56k diamonds. I traded 400k diamonds for this winter 19 halo, which I will later come to regret due to how hard it was to trade. I purchased more Goddess of Triumph heels for 105k diamonds. The Fluttery Frozen fan finally sold for 20k diamonds. I then purchased another Wicked Vampiress skirt for 30k diamonds. I also bought this Celestial Veil for 10k diamonds. The Whimsy Witch skirt sold for 35k diamonds. I bought this Darling Valentina skirt for 11k diamonds. One of the Wicked Vampiress skirts sold for 35k diamonds. I sold these Peppermint Princess sleeves for 2k diamonds. And bought another Wicked Vampiress skirt for 30k diamonds. I traded the Posy crown for the prom dress. And sold the prom dress for 285k diamonds. I bought some Starlight sneaks for 60k diamonds. And sold another Wicked Vampiress skirt for 35k diamonds. And bought more Starlight sneaks for 60k diamonds. I then bought this Nymph dress for 60k diamonds too. I traded this Wicked Vampiress bodice for this Goddess of Triumph skirt and 60k diamonds. I bought this Lolita scarf for 3.5k diamonds. I then bought more cookie cutters for 16k diamonds. I bought more Snow Swan heels for 56k diamonds. I also bought more Goddess of Triumph heels for 100k diamonds. I bought these party beads at 4k, I think they're underrated. I then bought this December's Dreams skirt for 20k diamonds. Afterwards I sold these Goddess of Triumph heels for 110k diamonds. I purchased more Starlight heels for 60k diamonds. I sold this Nymph dress for 65k diamonds. I then sold some Snow Swan heels for 60k diamonds. I then traded Goddess of Triumph heels for watercolor shoes. I also sold Goddess of Triumph heels and the bodice for 195k diamonds. The Whimsy Witch bodice also sold for 18k diamonds. I purchased this Royal Stroll in the Garden skirt for 500 diamonds. I then sold more Snow Swan heels for 60k diamonds. I also sold these watercolor shoes for 115k diamonds. I then bought a couple Whimsy Witch bodices for 15k each. I then sold the Darling Valentina skirt for 14k. I then bought another Wicked Vampiress skirt for 30k diamonds. I sold Mermaid 20 for 500k. I then bought large Train Bow skirt for 435k diamonds. I bought another Magical Enchantress for 80k Oswell, which I then traded for Chromie heels, which I sold for 100k diamonds. Afterwards I bought more Goddess of Triumph heels for 100k diamonds. I then bought another Wicked Vampiress skirt for 30k. And another Celestial Veil for 8k diamonds. And a couple more Spring 20 halos which I should make 40k profit from selling. I then sold some Starlight sneaks for 65k diamonds. I purchased a Valk dress for 180k diamonds. This Charmed Heart bodice for 79k. I then sold one of the Spring 20 halos for 350k. And then bought another afterwards for 340k because I can't resist a good deal. I eventually sold the Mon Chéri bag for 3.6k diamonds. I bought more Snow Swan heels for 55k. I traded the Snow Swan heels for Whimsy Witch shoes and Opposites Attract sleeves. I then sold Posy sleeves for 60k. I bought another Whimsy Witch bodice for 15k. I then sold this Mend My Heart teddy for 7k diamonds. Some Starfrost skates for 17k. The Wicked Vampiress skirt and Valk dress for 225k. Starlight sneaks for 65k. Celestial bouquet for 6,969 diamonds. More Starlight sneaks for 65k. And some Goth Lolita sleeves for 10k. This person was doing a challenge, so I traded them opposites attract sleeves for this skirt. I purchased more Goddess of Triumph heels for 100k. I bought another Vampire's Heir for 500 diamonds. I then traded this Charmed Heart bodice for these horns and 45k. I bought more Snow Swan heels for 55k diamonds. And sold more Starlight sneaks for 65k. I purchased this Ice Fairy dress for 80k diamonds, which I then traded for a Goddess of Triumph skirt and 10k diamonds. I then bought this Valk dress for 160k diamonds. I forgot to record it, but I purchased this prom dress. And sold some more Snow Swan heels for 60k. I then sold the Valk dress for 200k diamonds. Yet again I purchased more Starlight sneaks for 60k diamonds. This Goddess of Triumph bow sold for 150k diamonds. I then bought another Ice Fairy dress for 80k. And a Nymph dress for 60k. I eventually sold the Love and Justice skirt for 10k. I sold the Ice Fairy dress and Nymph dress to my Pookie Bear with a hoarding and spending problem for 150k. I then traded the other Ice Fairy dress for this Goth skirt and 10k. My Pookie Bear with a hoarding and spending problem then bought a bunch of wings for 25k diamonds. I purchased another Valk dress for 180k. And finally sold this dang Secret Fairy on Earth skirt for 3k diamonds. I then sold some Goddess of Triumph heels for 110k. I then purchased another Wicked Vampiress skirt for 30k diamonds. I then purchased this Avrilla skirt for 269k diamonds. I sold more Goddess of Triumph heels for 110k diamonds. I then purchased a Charmed Heart bodice for 70k diamonds. I traded this Winter 19 Halo for Lucky 20. The Avrilla skirt sold quickly for 300,069 diamonds. I then traded the Lucky Halo for Spring 20, this Goddess of Triumph bodice and 20k diamonds, which is a nice estimated 50k win based off of what Lucky 20 is worth. I purchased even more Snow Swan heels for 55k diamonds. I then sold the Mend My Heart Teddy and Party Beads together for 15k to someone who appreciates party beads just as much as I do. I then traded this Valk dress for 190k diamonds, Day of the Dead flower crown and this impossible to sell door handle which will forever remain in my inventory. As you've probably expected by now, I purchased more Goddess of Triumph heels for 100k. I then also purchased this Whimsy Witch skirt for 33k diamonds. The Charmed Heart bodice sold for 85k diamonds. I then sold some Snow Swan heels for 57k diamonds. The December's Dream skirt sold for 25k diamonds. I purchased more Starlight sneaks for 60k. I also bought this Wicked Vampiress bodice for 110k, which I can resell for 130k. Someone then sold me this Opposites Attract dress for 20k diamonds. I then traded Starlight sneaks for this Goddess of Triumph bodice, which is a 15k win. I also purchased Opposites Attract boots for 20k. Some cookie cutters eventually sold for 17k diamonds. And the December's Dream bodice finally sold for 9,069 diamonds. The prom dress then sold for 295k diamonds. I purchased another Avrilla skirt for 265k. I traded the horns for the Summer Fantasy set, which I then traded for the Starfrost set, which I then sold for 50k diamonds. Somebody then purchased the Goddess of Triumph bow, heels and opposites attract shoes for 285k diamonds. The Whimsy Witch bodice then sold for 18k. This Royal Stroll in the Garden skirt finally sold for 3k diamonds. This Celestial Flowers bouquet then sold for 6.5k diamonds. The Lolita scarf also then sold for 4,069 diamonds. I purchased this Posy butterfly for the steal of 85k diamonds, which sold quickly alongside the Wicked Vampiress bodice for 230k diamonds and this Fallen Fae tiara. I purchased some more Starlight sneaks for 55k diamonds. Some Whimsy Witch shoes then sold for 52,069 diamonds. Another Whimsy Witch bodice sold for 18k diamonds. I purchased this Posy skirt for 65k diamonds. The Fallen Fae tiara eventually sold for 20,069 diamonds. I purchased another Valk dress for 160k diamonds. This Whimsy Witch skirt then sold for 35k diamonds. Two pairs of Starlight sneaks sold for 65k each. I then purchased more for 45k diamonds. This December's Dream skirt sold for 25k diamonds. I purchased even more Starlight sneaks for 60k diamonds. I traded these Snow Swan heels for this parasol, cookie cutters and 15k diamonds. Somebody purchased a Wicked Vampiress skirt and Posy skirt together for 110k diamonds. Another Whimsy Witch bodice sold for 18,100 diamonds. I purchased this Posy butterfly for 110k. Yet another Whimsy Witch bodice sold for 18,100 diamonds. I purchased more cookie cutters for 13k diamonds. And another parasol for 30k diamonds. Some Snow Swan heels sold for 60k diamonds. I purchased even more cookie cutters for 12k diamonds. And more Starlight sneaks for 60k diamonds. I also purchased this Posy skirt for 70k diamonds. I forgot to record a fair few trades, so I do apologize if certain things don't make sense from this point on. I purchased another Posy skirt afterwards for 70k diamonds. Eventually the other Royal Stroll in the Garden skirt also sold for 3k diamonds. This Spring 20 sold for 350k diamonds. Then Halloween Halo 2019 sold for 900k. I purchased this Wicked Vampiress skirt for 30k diamonds. This Opposites Attract dress sold for 25k diamonds. I traded this Valk dress and 55k for 200k and Snow Swan heels. I purchased another Valk dress for 175k. I then purchased yet another Posy skirt for 69k diamonds. And more Snow Swan heels for 50k diamonds. I then purchased this Angelic Promises necklace for 55k diamonds. This Celestial Veil sold for 11k diamonds. I purchased this Charmed Heart bodice for 75k diamonds. And bought this Lucky 20 Halo for 385k diamonds. I then purchased this Dear Dolly skirt for 7k diamonds. By now you're most likely tired of hearing this, but I purchased another Posy skirt for 65k diamonds. I then purchased another Wicked Vampiress skirt for 30k. The Avrilla skirt sold for 300k diamonds. This Valk dress then sold for 190k diamonds. I purchased these watercolor shoes for 100k diamonds. I then purchased another Avrilla skirt for 290k diamonds. I then purchased this TTYL purse for 5k diamonds. And this Nymph dress for 60k. I purchased more cookie cutters for 15k. Some Starlight sneaks sold for 65k diamonds. And these Snow Swan heels sold for 60k. And another pair of Starlight sneaks for 65k. This posy skirt then sold for 75k diamonds. The Dear Dolly skirt also then sold for 8k diamonds. Some more Starlight sneaks then sold for 65k as usual. Hello, future leaves here. From this point on things might get very repetitive, as what follows from this point on is mostly just me selling stuff. Feel free to skip towards the end if you want to see when I actually get the Enchantraverse halo. Now that that's out of the way, let's continue. This nymph dress sold for 65k diamonds. More snow swan heels sold for 60k diamonds. This Angelic Promises necklace then sold for 70k diamonds. Another celestial veil then sold for 12k diamonds. I purchased another Angelic Promises necklace for 67k diamonds. And another for 65k. The large train bow skirt finally sold for 440k diamonds. The Avrilla skirt then sold for 300k diamonds. The posy butterfly sold for 115k diamonds. This Mare 20 halo sold for 515k diamonds. I traded 2 spring 20s for corrupt halo and a bunch of items which I estimated to be a 50k max win. This charmed heart bodice sold for 90k diamonds. I traded the Goddess of Triumph bodice for this ice fairy dress. I then traded the Goddess of Triumph skirt for Magical Enchantress. I purchased this Goddess of Triumph bow for 130k. This Fallen Fae tiara sold for 20k diamonds. The Goddess of Triumph heels sold for 110k. I traded the Corrupt halo for Lucky 20, Goddess of Triumph heels and 100k diamonds. I purchased another Lucky 20 for 390k. The parasol sold for 35k diamonds. A posy skirt sold for 75k diamonds. I purchased another Whimsy Witch bodice for 15k diamonds. A Goddess of Triumph parasol for 265k. Which sold afterwards for 300k. I then purchased another Angelic Promises necklace for 60k diamonds. I then purchased more Goddess of Triumph heels for 100k diamonds. And more afterwards for the same price. I then purchased another Mare 20 halo for 480k. The Magical Enchantress sold for 90k diamonds. I then traded the Fallen Fae wings for this steampunk skirt. I purchased the Wicked Vampress skirt and bodice for 150k diamonds. And Mermia heels for 230k. I traded the Goddess of Triumph heels for watercolor shoes. The TTYL purse sold for 7k diamonds. I then purchased more Starlight sneaks for 60k. And another Mare 20 for 475k. The steampunk skirt sold for 35k diamonds. And the Mermia heels sold for 240k diamonds. I purchased more Snow Swan heels for 55k diamonds. I then purchased this Whimsy Witch skirt for 30k diamonds. The watercolor shoes sold for 115k diamonds. I purchased a parasol, summer shredder boots and cookie cutters for 69k diamonds. And this charmed heart skirt for 70k diamonds. I then paid 47k for cookie cutters and Whimsy Witch skirt. And a bunch more items for 40k. The Gothicutie bodice sold for 12k. I sold this Angelic Promises necklace for 69k diamonds. And then sold this parasol for 35k. I then purchased this Prom Queen dress for 255k. And more Starlight sneaks for 60k. I then purchased a Snow Swan skirt for 20k. And another Angelic Promises necklace for 60k. While I was at it, I purchased another Mare 20 Halo for 385k. This posy skirt sold for 75k diamonds. I then purchased this nymph dress for 60k. The Royal Rebel skirt sold for 10k diamonds. And the Popstar skirt sold for 2,500 diamonds. An Angelic Promises necklace sold for 66k. The Darling Valentina bodice then sold for 19k. A parasol then sold for 35k. I then traded the Goddess of Triumph bodice for Magical Enchantress. And traded an Angelic Promises necklace for Starlight skirt and 37k diamonds. And sold the Starlight skirt afterwards for 27k. I then sold another Angelic Promises necklace for 65k. I traded some Goddess of Triumph heels for the Goddess of Triumph skirt and sleeves. The sleeves then sold for 45k. Another Whimsy Witch bodice sold for 18k. The Nymph dress then sold for 65k. The TTYL skirt then sold for 19k. I purchased some Snow Swan heels again for 50k. The Wicked Vampiress bodice sold for 130k diamonds. The Angel Halo then sold for 12k. And the Ice Fairy dress sold for 90k. The Shredders sold for 28k. And one of the Lucky 20s sold for 400k. The Prom dress sold for 280k. This Charmed Heart skirt sold for 75k. I traded Starlight sneaks for Whimsy Witch shoes, Starlight cardigan, and some booties. Some cookie cutters sold for 16,969 diamonds. The Starlight cardigan sold afterwards for 20k. Another Lucky 20 sold for 400k diamonds. The Dear Dolly Tea Party bow eventually sold for 2k. I traded Starlight sneaks and ear cuffs for 65k. The Goddess of Triumph skirt sold for 80k. This Popstar bodice sold for 2.5k. And this Whimsy Witch skirt sold for 34k. Someone traded me Spring 21 for Batmo heels and Mare 20. I eventually traded my Crown Court bodice that I got from the Castle toy for a Goddess of Triumph bodice, Mare Mia gown, Snow Swan bodice and 170k diamonds. The sleeves for 60k. And the skirt for 250k. Eventually the Fallen Fae sleeves sold for 15k. The watercolor shoes sold for 114k diamonds. The Mare Mia gown then sold for 215k. The Flower crown sold for 3,569 diamonds. And the December's Dreams sleeves sold for 13,569 diamonds. I sold another Lucky 20 for 400k diamonds. I then sold both the Snow Swan heels and skirt for 83k. And the Fallen Fae bodice for 15k. The Peppermint Princess bodice sold for 15k. I sold more Goddess of Triumph heels for 110k diamonds. I then sold this Whimsy Witch bodice for 15k while I was tired out of my mind. The Goddess of Triumph bodice sold for 80k diamonds. The Snow Swan bodice for 20k. I then traded one of the Wicked Vampiress skirts for this parasol, which I sold for 35k. I then purchased another parasol for 30k. And sold a Wicked Vampiress skirt for 33k. I then traded this Goddess of Triumph bow for Snow Swan heels, steampunk belt and Vok helm. The Summer Fantasy sleeves sold for 7k. More Snow Swan heels sold for 60k as usual. I then purchased more for 55k. After what felt like 69 eternities, the Slay It skirt finally sold for 3.5k diamonds. I then traded Magical Enchantress for a Charmed Heart Bodice. Somebody purchased a couple skirts and cookie cutters for 120k. I then traded Wicked Vampiress, Goddess of Triumph Bow, Mare 20 Halo and Snow Swan Heels for Mare 21. I then traded Mare 20 and 21 for 1,225,000 diamonds and Heavenly Harp. This cowboy hat sold for 1.5k diamonds. I then traded cookie cutters for December's Dream shoes. The Opposites Attract shoes sold for 25k. I then traded 15k for December's Dream shoes. I sold Spring 21 for 569k diamonds. I then traded cookie cutters for this December's Dream skirt. And then traded more cookie cutters for Gothic Cutie boots. I then sold the December's Dream skirt for 25k. And traded more cookie cutters for more DCD shoes. I then traded this parasol for 35k diamonds. I sold some DCD shoes for 18k diamonds. I then sold Heavenly Harp for 5k diamonds. I purchased more Snow Swan heels for 50k. I then traded DCD shoes for a DCD skirt. I also traded 60k for this Angelic Promises necklace. Purchased more Goddess of Triumph heels for 100k. Repurchased Mare 20 from the first episode of this series. And purchased the Enchantraverse Halo for 2,769,069 diamonds and therefore reaching this episode's goal. As you guys can probably tell by the last trade and me wearing the halo, I reached this episode's goal. If you've watched all the way through and made it this far, then kudos to you for staying the full painful hour. I know this video probably won't blow up or anything, but I'd still appreciate it if for whatever reason you're watching this and traded with me during this video, to just say hi down below. The main reason this video is twice as long as it needs to be is because I wanted to leave myself with a stable foundation for profit trading up to the goal halo in the next video. The only items I will be keeping from now on until I somehow reach one of every obtainable halo in game are the halos from this series and the 2 Game Pass halos I got as compensation when they removed the diamond multipliers. If I just keep buying things for personal use, it'll hold me back due to attachment to that item, which could be used instead for profit trading. I think this is where I'm going to end this video. Again, thank you so much for watching me through this episode's journey, and goodbye until next time.